US NATO aircraft will have to be shooting and destroying Russian surface-to-air military targets within Russia's borders. Hey legends, I hope you're all well, having a good day. I thought today I'd make a video to talk about something I don't think is, I guess, explained very well, or that somewhat understood from some of the comments I've seen and a lot of people calling for this, being the no-fly zone over Ukraine. And I want to go over how this simple task in reality is not very simple and could lead down a road that none of us want to go down. Firstly, I just want to say that what we're seeing in Ukraine is shocking, and I believe that the West should support in any way they can. But the West at some point needs to differentiate if they're going to get drawn into this war and fight weapon to weapon, or they're going to keep supplying weapons to Ukraine like they are. The NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, it's probably mixed that up, terrible pronunciation, I understand, sorry, explained on Friday that the military alliance would not impose or enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine. A no-fly zone isn't just like asking Russia to stop flying. It's not like closing a road. You don't just put up signs and no one goes down there. You don't just ask, you have to enforce a no-fly zone. Now, firstly, this all stems from air superiority. This is one of the absolute keystones in dominating the ground and winning a war. Not only once you've got air superiority can you then attack your enemy's ground-based targets, but you can also protect your own ground-based targets. And Russia claimed that 2 days into the war they had this air superiority, which they didn't have, obviously, because of the amount of vehicles and troops that they lost in those wars. But it's been somewhat rumoured and filtered down that the Russian command had told those ground-based forces that they had air superiority, and I believe that this is the reason we saw these vehicles move, I guess, quicker and with more confidence into areas, because they believed they owned the sky. And next thing, we've all seen these columns of vehicles hit by missiles from the air and from ground, sending a lot of these young Russian troops into just a graveyard. But, we're now, I believe, 19 days into this war, and the airspace is still heavily contested. We're seeing every day helicopters and Russian aircraft shot down. We're not seeing as much of the Ukrainian elements hit and shot down, and that's probably more. One, Russia has 10-1 the planes that Ukraine has, but also a lot of the Western groups and pro-Ukrainian groups don't share any of that information out, and none of the Russians are allowed to use the internet. None of the Russian troops or soldiers are allowed to use it. So that's, I guess, why we're not seeing any of those videos come out of the Ukrainian pieces being hit. But these planes, both sides, are being hit by surface-to-air missiles. After the initial invasion, everything, I guess, was going to how experts saw this happening, that you'd attack with missiles, take out those key radar targets, air defense targets, and then a huge attack force of aircraft, helicopters to come in, gain air superiority as quickly as you can before the ground forces move in. And on paper, Russia gaining air superiority over Ukraine should have been a simple task, on paper at least. And a lot of experts are still very unsure of why we haven't seen this happen yet, and how Russia haven't been able to actually gain that superiority. Now, there are two main theories floating around. The first one of these theories is the belief of that the Russians have not got the coordination of the commanders and to the pilots and the tactics to actually complete a task like this, sending in multiple waves of planes to take out these air defense systems. That they haven't received the training necessary to do this, and the coordination is not there. In the US, for example, there are full groups of planes and full squadrons. That's probably the wrong word, I'm sorry any parts of there, but full squadrons just dedicated to gaining that initial break in air superiority. And it's the Russian pilots do not receive the training or time on the tools that those American pilots do. And, the Russian jets tend to fly in smaller groups, so that, I guess, leads into the theory that the coordination of that air and the training is not up to par to do that. The second theory is that Russia predicted they would not receive the resistance that they have from Ukraine, that they thought they'd be almost welcomed with open arms, get some resistance, but be able to overcome that very quickly. Where, it's almost 20 days in now, and that resistance is still very strong. But the Secretary General has said that NATO has the responsibility to stop the war escalating and moving beyond Ukraine. And this would be catastrophic if the war is already catastrophic, but if it moves beyond Ukraine, that becomes even more catastrophic. And NATO has made it clear that they will not move in by the ground or by the air into Ukrainian territory. The only way to actually enforce a no-fly zone is to put NATO aircraft, which will be mostly American, into Ukrainian airspace. And therefore, to impose this no-fly zone means shooting down Russian planes, shooting down Russian jets, shooting down Russian helicopters, shooting down their bombers. And not only that, but then you have to shoot and destroy their surface-to-air missiles, the radars that control that, and the control centres which control the radar to the surface-to-air missiles. You have to destroy all of that. And one of the biggest overlooked things in this is you're not only destroying the Russian surface-to-air capability within Ukrainian borders, Russia have within their borders and within the Belarus borders, Russia has surface-to-air missiles within those. But systems like the S-400 launcher, which is in Russian territory, has a range of 250 miles, about 400 kilometres, that is still within their border. But the range of that comes into, of course, Ukrainian airspace. Therefore, US NATO aircraft will have to be shooting and destroying Russian surface-to-air military targets within Russia's borders. And I think all of us can agree that leads us down a path that no one wants to go, and the human cost of military, civilian, everything of US NATO planes attacking and destroying Russian targets within Russian or Belarus borders, that escalates things massively. But this is the only way to actually enforce that no-fly zone, if that was the option that NATO wanted to go down. NATO have said that they believe that if they did this, it would end in almost a total war in Europe and cause more human suffering, more civilians killed, and that it would commit the US and most of Europe into this war. What happens next? Well, I guess that's anyone's guess. If they were to actually enforce this, I guess that's anyone's guess. But remember that both NATO and Russia are nuclear capable armed powers, and Russia are throwing around ideas of this all the time. That said, I'm in Poland, I'm in Krakow at the moment, and there is massive increased military presence here of US and other NATO countries' forces. Their soldiers are everywhere, It's crazy. So I thought I'd do my best to explain this to you. It's something that I didn't understand myself as well, because I thought, why wouldn't we just close the airspace? But I never really thought about, well, you're not closing it by just putting up a no one fly here. You're closing it by force. You're closing it by no one is to fly in, we will shoot you down. And in my opinion, what is happening is just horrific already. But what could potentially happen if US planes were shooting down Russian planes in Ukrainian airspace, and US planes and NATO aircraft, I should say, destroying Russian military targets, surface-to-air missiles within Russian borders, that commits everyone to this, and that could start, you never know what that could start. It could start anything. Okay then, have a great day. You've heard me ramble enough. Wherever you are, stay safe, look after yourself. And I'll see you in the next one. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah.